creativity to me is really building, something out of nothing or kind of blazing a path that's not obvious in front of you.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring the innovators, creators, and disruptors who are fueling innovation in emerging markets across the country. I'm Tyler Kelly. I'm here with my co-host,
Leanne Buchanan. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And Tyler and I are joined by a very special guest. And so Matt Raithel, and you are the owner, studio director of Graphite Labs. How are you doing today?
Best day ever. How about you?
Best day ever.
I love that. You've got such great energy. So Matt, thanks for joining us. I think this is going to be a fun conversation just because you seem like a fun person.
I try to be.
I love to start off these conversations before we talk about your job and your career journey. We want to get to know who you are as a person behind the innovation. So, Matt, my first question for you is, what is your superpower and when did you first discover it?
Oh, my goodness. If I asked others to describe my superpower, I think they would say that I'm probably painfully optimistic. I think... Yeah, I work in software dev, so there's always problems, right? There's always something to tackle. Painful optimism, always trying to kind of push through, I think, would be something people would say. I don't know.
I love the optimism, and I think it kind of is a great tie-in to the world that you're in.
For sure.
You mentioned software dev, but we were talking before we got started about video games. And I don't play video games anymore, but I know when I was younger, Super Mario Brothers was like the funnest activity. So talk to us about how you found your way into that world.
Yeah, well, I'm an 80s kid. I was born alongside the Atari. I like to say I went to grade school with the Nintendo. I got my driver's license with the Nintendo 64. And, I went to college when PlayStation was a hit. But I always wanted to do something creative. I always wanted to do something that was... allowed me to kind of fuel my artistic side. And video games is kind of that blend between technical and artistic. So it really was a good fit. But I didn't get my in until I went to school for computer animation and got connected with a startup in Springfield, Missouri. So it wasn't something that, I really had a perfect path for initially. Just a few places, right time, right place type of moments led me into that.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the Atari shirt on today.
Proudly representing the OG. Yeah, for sure.
Did you ever beat Mario Brothers, Leanne, Matt?
Absolutely.
Okay.
For me, I wanted to give her a chance to go
Yeah.
first. Yeah.
The funny thing is, I was at a conference yesterday, and one of the speakers showed the brain scans of 60-year-olds who started playing video games versus those who hadn't.
Yeah.
And like the activity's just off the charts. It is good for you. Let's just put it that way.
Keeps you sharp.
Yeah. So Atari, what's the significance of Atari?
Well, when you think about Atari, they were the first home console. They were their first popular home console. You had a few others that led before, but, Atari for me was the first video game system I ever played. That was maybe 4 or 5. And it just kind of, I hear people talk about Star Wars. Right? Oh, I went into the theater and Star Wars blew my mind. Well, the Atari was that for me. The Nintendo was that for me. These were things that just kind of like permanently changed my DNA, So I've always had a lot of respect for the company. Just recently, we had our first collaboration with Atari launched last week. So now we're talking about in a period of 50 years, a company that really started our industry, now investing in our studio and Graphite Lab and helping us bring new games to market. We're talking about some very well-distanced bookends to my story here, but yeah, it's been pretty thrilling. So collaborating with them has been a dream come true.
So I'm kind of curious to understand from you that journey of game creation.
Sure.
Walk us through what the process is like from a creative standpoint to kind of the nuts and bolts, because a lot of times when we play games, and I haven't played a game in a very long time, but now I'm very much convinced to get back to
get in there
to playing video games, but we don't understand how much work happens behind the scenes. So what is that process like?
Yeah, well, it's certainly changed from when I started to making games now. So when I started, you used to have to make all of your own engines and tools. Imagine if you're building a house and you had to actually make the hammer and saw first. That's what things were like 20 years ago, 25 and 30 years ago. Recently, it's much more like, it's more akin to like graphic design. We have off-the-shelf engines, Unity, Unreal. These are software that you can download and get a real big head start. So when we're crafting games, we're using software that's readily available and just injecting our creativity into those systems, coming up with mechanics, coming up with the visuals, the story, the sound, the music. So we're still creating a lot, but we have a much more robust head start than we did 20 years ago. So it's, still a lot of hard work. We're still talking about potentially, year-long processes to get an idea out of your head and into the console, onto the PS5 or whatever else. But we have a lot more, tools at our disposal these days.
What is your favorite game that you've worked on and why?
Oh, well, the one that we just released is probably the one top of mind right now. And there's a few reasons why it's legitimately my favorite. Having an investment from Atari into making this game, it's called Combinera. Imagine moving a bunch of shapes all at once and trying to get them to meet one another. It's a puzzle game. It's very minimalistic. You look at it and you think, oh, there's really like art and care in this one. So going back to my roots of, artistry and creativity, you can see all of that in this game. And sometimes you make games that feature popular brands and we don't get to be creative with Transformers. We don't get to be as creative with, popular existing brands. So to have our own out there is really pretty fulfilling.
I'm sure everybody listening that has the talent is probably like, I want to make games. But it's not that easy. And I'm not talking about like the actual doing of it, but like just the business side of being a game developer. Tell me about some challenges there.
And you'll appreciate this. Like making a game itself, we could make a game today, and by tonight we've got something going. Getting your game out there, getting it noticed, rising above the noise, for every benefit that game developers have been offered recently of, it's cheaper, there's tools available, there's digital marketplaces. Well, that creates a lot of visual noise. There's 1,000 games that come out every day now. So on the business side, making the game maybe technically easier, getting your game noticed, getting it out there, getting it in the hands of players, getting them to choose your game over another, that's still pretty difficult, if not harder than it was 20 years ago.
What have you learned about this process of marketing? We were just talking before about marketing speak and marketing jargon, but thinking about the strategies that you've had to implement as you've put out different games from Graphite Labs and maybe in your former life, like what have you learned is the secret sauce, if you will, to ensuring a game can rise above the noise?
Well, I think coming at it from a lot of different angles. It's not just one strategy or one interview or one advertisement. It comes from a lot of places these days. You've got traditional marketing with, print and video, and you've got more modern marketing of going on Twitch streams and YouTube channels and being active on Twitter and Instagram and goodness, TikTok. So if you're not building out that entire portfolio of approach, you're missing so many opportunities to connect with players. And that probably applies to any business. Think about it of like this bigger web versus like just one lane.
So thinking of opportunity, like what's the one thing you're most excited about going into, this next quarter, this next year?
The release we just had was our first original property in 3 or 4 years. We've already got wheels turning to release another original property, which is a big difference for us. Making games for Hasbro, Nickelodeon, Disney, incredibly fulfilling. But making our own games, putting our own properties out there, giving them a chance to rise to the level of Transformers or, any of these Hasbro popular titles, that's the one that has us really on fire. And that's the one that we're making some steps on, and we've already, committed to doing some of those other properties. So that's got me excited for sure.
Well, congratulations. That's really exciting.
Thank you.
To step out and do something that is from soup to nuts, your own creation.
Well said.
I'm curious to understand what advice you would have for someone that wants to be in your position. We've talked a little bit about your career. I'd love to delve into it a little bit more. But
Sure.
for someone that aspires to be in your role, to be making games, to be getting investment from Atari,
Sure.
what advice would you have for them?
From a very early age, I got my experience playing games. You want to be a musician, you can't be a musician without consuming music. You want to be an artist, you can't become an artist without drawing and studying art. It's the same thing for games. So I'm going to give everybody some homework. You go and you load up your PS5 and you play it, but you play it with purpose. Study it, break it down, understand that there's art and code and sound and music and writing and all these things that go into the game, and start to kind of understand which one lights you up the most. So that's kind of the path that I took. Now, there are more traditional means of getting into the industry. We've got higher ed programs. There's almost 800 higher ed programs around the country. There's one that I'm involved with here in St. Louis at Maryville University, where we are growing game design program and future game designers right here in St. Louis. So there are more traditional means to get into it. But if you're not yet at that collegiate level, or college just isn't, go home, play some games, study them, break them down, and really commit to that passion is my advice.
How do you define creativity? Because when we started off our conversation, you honed straight into creativity being the inspiration spark to you, who you are, and kind of what you do. But how do you define it?
I don't know that I've ever been asked that exactly. I get asked to define art all the time. It's kind of always one way. But creativity to me is really building, something out of nothing, or kind of blazing a path that's not obvious in front of you. We have a philosophy at Graphite Lab that there's no such thing, or rather we phrase it this way: have options, not obstacles. Mm-hmm. So that's where the creativity comes into play. You don't have to be an artist. You can be a programmer and have a programming challenge and have to find a creative path around it, right? You got to make something in 4 days. What are your options to getting it done? And that pulls creativity, even from a technical mind. So I think I'll summarize it with that, trying to commit to those different options and not being stumped by those obstacles. Yeah.
That's awesome. Great. Matt, it is time for the lightning round.
Yeah.
Lay it on me.
Yeah. And we have new cards for this season.
So these cards require you to kind of finish the sentence.
All right.
Complete the idea. So we've got a little bit of time to get through quite a few.
All right. I'm ready.
Let's see what we have here. A dream I've never shared.
Ooh.
Oh, man. That's not a good completion to that sentence. Oh my gosh, so hard. Why my first one, and I lose points as a game designer. a dream that I've never shared.
You dream all day.
Yeah. The things that popped into my head that I keep trying to stop myself is getting out traveling more. Secretly, I would love to be out and bouncing around, but I'm so committed to these current passions that maybe that's it, right? Getting out and kind of feeling a little bit more like relaxed at times feels like a dream to me right now.
That's great.
Yeah.
The best prank I've ever pulled off.
Oh, I convinced my grandmother that my car got totaled, and told her I was filling out a police report and everything, and asked her the date. And when she told me it was April 1st, April Fool's Day, then she got the joke. That was a pretty good one. I like to mess with my grandma quite a lot. It's not nice, but
That's great.
Yeah.
That's
Poor
great.
grandma.
She's my best prank target.
I would sell everything I have to be able to.
I don't know if I want to sell all my stuff. I don't know. I'm pretty satisfied, feeling pretty good. I don't know. Selling stuff seems like a lot of work.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one. Something I would like to change about the way I deal with conflict is.
Oh man. I think sometimes I can be more direct. I have a very diplomatic way of addressing conflict, but sometimes you just need to be clear, like, this is not working. My expectations are this. And I think you can do that and still be compassionate, but sometimes I feel like I need to commit to that clarity a little bit more, just so that we know, so we're on the same page, right? So that we get that going.
I think as a leader, it is so very important to develop that skill set.
Absolutely.
Of, both the diplomatic delivery, but also being clear and managing expectations. So that's great.
For sure.
This is the final. Yeah?
Yeah, sure.
When I notice myself getting older, I
Well, I am noticing myself getting older right now. Thank you for bringing that up. I've realized that in an industry like mine, it's like you're on all the time. But I am kind of noticing now that I want to kind of build that legacy and build that generation that comes after me. So as I notice myself getting older, I'm thinking much more about how I motivate, mentor, and promote in all ways those that are coming after me. That's really been on my mind a lot lately.
That's great. It's this idea of paying it forward with what you've been able to accomplish.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah, for sure.
So before we ask for, how to get in touch and your website and all that good stuff, one word of wisdom.
One word of wisdom.
That you're going to leave us with.
One word of wisdom. I have to leave you with the word that I started with, which is optimism.
Be optimistic. That's great.
So how can people get in touch with you and Graphite Lab?
You can find Graphite Lab on all social media at Graphite Lab. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're all over the place. GraphiteLab.com. Find us on all the storefronts, everything from PlayStation to mobile at Graphite Lab. And you can find me at Raithel Show, which is a name that needs another show for explanation. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much. I learned a lot, and I can't wait to get back into playing video games.
Go home and play some games, everybody.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to Innovation City. If you like this episode, you can find more episodes at innovationcity.co or anywhere where you watch or listen to podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and we'll see you next week.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation.